Introducing our lunch keynote speaker will be Kim Jordan. She's the co-founder and executive chair of New Belgium Brewing. She has extensive experience at the intersection of business, the environment, and community. She created one of the most respected and innovative breweries in the country. An entrepreneur, she frequently speaks on how to establish a vibrant and rewarding work culture that enhances the bottom line. A few years ago, Forbes called her one of the most successful self-made women, and she will introduce Governor Hickenlooper. Kim.
Anne caught me chatting there. Good afternoon. I am so glad to be here among people who are doing really important work, both for our country and our planet. Thanks to Bob Perciasepi, Anne McCabe, and Janet Peace for inviting me, and also thanks to Dana Villanueva for all of her work as my co-worker and making sure that I didn't get any of my facts wrong. Things change at New Belgium, and I want to give you the newest information. The last year has been an interesting one. I don't need to tell you that. Where business leaders are resetting the expectation of their enterprises in their role in environmental and social change. Heck, I would say the last week has been pretty interesting as well. But it gives me hope because, when I see businesses step up to say that how we show up in the world, how socially responsive we are. Clearly, I think the last couple of years we've seen stronger governance presses on corporations, and I'm sure that that has something to do with it, and I also think there's a real need to think about liability and things like stranded assets. So I know all of that goes into that equation, but I guess I'm hopeful that there's also that human perspective that says we need to stand up and do the right thing and make the right investments and choose the right paths. I've been thinking about the interplay between business, advocacy organizations, and policymakers recently. So maybe my theme today is something like actions big and small, given the size of a New Belgium compared to a General Motors. It's going to take all of us, all sizes of us, in all sectors, policymakers, activists, businesses, NGOs, and politicians, to overcome the significant and pressing threats that face our climate and our society. Today I'm going to talk about New Belgium, what we've done and why, and I think we'll have time for some Q&A at the end, which is always my favorite part. So let me get started here. A little history of New Belgium, and the reason that this piece about the bike is important, I'll pick that up later. My then husband, Jeff Liebisch, went on a mountain bike trip in Europe, and he came home as a home brewer and made a beer called Fat Tire. And that's really fundamentally affected who we are as a company. Thank you to all of you who have had Fat Tire. I say from the very deepest part of my heart, for all of my coworkers, thank you very much. And it's really kind of informed who we are as a company. We started in the basement of our house, which was a space not as big as this platform that I'm on. So this is really an entrepreneurial story I'm telling. Jeff and I, before we ever made any beer, went on a hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, and we said we wanted to be these 4 things with our baby company. And you'll notice, I assumed I have a pointer. That's fine, I don't have a pointer. The third one is to be environmental stewards. To sort of set that up, people like Yvon Chouinard, Gary Hirschberg, Gary Erickson, names that are known in the business community for their progressive practices, that's Patagonia, Stonyfield Farms, and Cliff Bar, respectively, were raised in the 60s and 70s, and it was natural for us as we created businesses to be thinking about the way we were going to show up in the world. It's been a really great surprise to understand that there are lots of intellectual and monetary and human resources in business, and that we have this opportunity to really let our corporate lives and our human lives live in collaboration and be consistent with one another. And so, you know, long before the triple bottom line was really a household phrase as it is now, we were thinking about our coworkers, about the footprint that we had, and also about profits, because you can be as groovy as you want to be, but for business, the ultimate form of sustainability is keeping the doors open. So we've really always tried to manage the tension between those. I showed you our first core values and beliefs. These are our second, because we realized we had nothing about our coworkers, and we also had nothing about customers. It was a little bit of an oversight because we hadn't even sold any beer at that point. So we circled back with our coworkers and came up with a more comprehensive set of beliefs about who we are. I want to show you this because it kind of sets the table for some other things. Energy conservation is, of course, at the bottom of anyone's pyramid, and at the top for us is an internal energy tax, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So this was our first kettle. In a brew house, you have 3 or 4 vessels, and this was and the kettle is really considered the crown jewel. Doesn't really look like the crown jewel there. You'll see at the top is an Ace Hardware trash can. It's very sophisticated. And inside of that is copper tubing. And this was our first attempt at making sure that we were recovering the energy from our stack so that we could reuse that to heat water for either the next brew or for cleaning. So, you know, one of the things that leaders do is to make sure that who they say they want to be, environmental stewards, and how they behave are, again, consistent with one another. This is Brew House 2 in Fort Collins. That's about $1 million worth of condenser stack there. So we're talking on a whole new scale. We built a brewery in Asheville, and we have one there as well. After that, in 2001, we put in a processed water treatment plant. This takes all of the water left over from making beer. There are nutrients left in that water. And we put those through an anaerobic and aerobic digestion, which creates methane, which the boys in the bubble there capture. And they run that through a combined heat and power plant, and we turn that into thermal and electrical energy at the brewery. For many years, we were a part of the city of Fort Collins's they had their own program. We are a municipal utility, and we had our own program in Wyoming that was a wind farm. And one of the things that New Belgium did was we said that we would commit to 10 years of purchasing 100% wind-powered electrical energy. And we met our commitments, and a few years later, we felt the city was kind of breaking on that whole notion, and they were going to start buying RECs instead of really building up a bigger wind farm. And so I referenced the internal energy tax. We decided that rather than continuing on with purchasing through the city with that incremental difference in kilowatt hour, that we would go ahead and tax ourselves and install on-site renewables, because we felt like it was a way. So we would, amass a pot of money and buy more PV, and we put on a second bubble on our processed water treatment plant, because it felt to us like a way that we could really kind of make good on our own promise to continuously work at our footprint. I'm pleased to say that the city of Fort Collins is going old school. They're going back to the OG wind farm up on the Wyoming-Colorado border. And so we're really excited about the possibility of reconfiguring our relationship there so that we can can't afford to put and we're also not located in the right place to put a wind farm on our property, but we're thrilled to be able to work with the city and with Colorado State University on their really exciting forward-pushing progress. In 2006, published in 2007, was our first SMS, or Sustainability Management System. We'd been going along doing all this work ad hoc, and that was great, and we did it because we wanted to, but it was a bit willy-nilly, and so we decided we kind of needed to focus ourselves. Shortly thereafter, we did a carbon footprint of a 6-pack of Fat Tire, and the thing about that was important was that we published it, and we worked with our trade association for America's craft brewers to really begin to think about how could brewers, big and small, realistically take some of this work and apply it in their own breweries. And we're always looking for that way that we can leverage what it is that we're doing with, people that we're collaborating with across the country. In a similar vein, we joined B Corp. We have been certified since 2013, but we've been members since slightly before that. And that was another way. B Corp requires that we assess ourselves every other year to be able to really make sure, not only on environmental areas, but also on social and governance issues, that we're measuring, we're making progress, we're looking at where things aren't going as well. As 100% employee-owned company, our worker situation is pretty strong, but it's always really helpful to hear from our coworkers what they think of how we're collectively doing this work and what our practice looks like to them. We also started doing a much better job of measuring our impact. I admit we started making a wider variety of beers, and we also started making hoppier beers, and all of those things take more water. And so, I wish I could say that our metrics are absolutely going the right way. We had a really robust conversation among our management team about this very thing yesterday. So we're working on, making sure that it's a process for us. It's not something that's ever done. And what all of that has done for us is freed us up to be really honest about who we are. And that was really seminal, to be able to say, okay, we're energy users, we're water users. What are we going to do about that? How are we going to make progress? And the first thing you have to do is kind of admit you have a problem, right, in the 12-step lingo. I was saying to Bill Ritter earlier that one of the great talents in life is to be able to make a heartfelt apology and to admit when you're wrong. And I would say this falls in the same bucket, really sort of understanding where you are and where you aspire to be. And for us, what that did also is to point out that we had a practice at New Belgium that was a splash, whether it was our PV or our process water treatment or our employee ownership or whatever it was we were doing. But we were really squandering our opportunity to make ripples. And in that corporate life that I want to have be as vibrant as it can be, I don't want to squander those opportunities. And so we really started to think about how we could look at this differently. Those of you who live in Colorado this one is actually the Salmon River, but the first thing we did was to work with waterkeeper, watershed type organizations across the West through an eye-catching campaign, sort of in homage to a beer that we made at that time called Skinny Dip, to talk about healthy watersheds and to connect people along river corridors in terms of helping them to make their work as effective as it could be. So we spent over $1 million with some other folks trying to work on that process. We worked on the EPA's Clean power plan. I'm looking over this way because I think, Gina, that may be how we first met along the way.
Both between power plant and fat tire.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe not in that order.
Depending on the day, right? Yeah, me too. So we worked with Ben & Jerry's and Protect Our Winners to try to bring sort of a light touch to the issue, because I think sometimes, beer, we are not making door stops or, umbrellas. We make something that's sort of emotionally sticky for people, and we want, again, to be sure that we're using that wisely. We've worked Ceres and Bicep and a group of brewers across the country kind of banded together to do a little policy and brand work on a climate declaration. We hosted a business discussion in Fort Collins with Aspen Snowmass. And we are still in. And we're really proud and thankful to be with many of you in this room who have steeled and doubled down and said, this is not the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning of the next chapter. And so we're really excited to be a part of this movement. We were going along, we had this brewery, we decided we needed another brewery, in part because our environmental footprint by having a brewery on the East Coast would be significantly reduced. Yesterday we were talking about vehicle emissions, and just by switching 2 states from Fort Collins to Asheville, 2 southeastern states, we were able to cut those emissions by 30%, which is a pretty significant number by just making that decision. And so those are, kind of the nitty-gritty things that we're thinking about along the way. And we chose Asheville in part because they had leadership in the city and the county who really were hungry for someone to sort of challenge their thinking where renewable energy and the built environment were concerned. And that was something that was important to us. So that was our site in the 60s. It's a gem. It's a brownfield site. We took out a little bit of trash. That's just a tiny pile. We recycled a bunch of concrete and reused a lot of it on site. It was a cattle auction barn and several other things. And we deconstructed all of that and reused it in the brewery, which was both a really satisfying process and has come to beautiful results. I was goofing around here and moved along. So I'm ready to move along now. I talked about the importance of the bike earlier. And we have had a festival for nearly 18 years called Tour de Fat. And if you've been to a Tour de Fat, it's really a celebration of community and bikes and beer. And the reason that that's important to me to bring up to you is that I think one of the things that we need to say in America is that, especially in urban areas, the roadway system is not just for cars. Because I think that begins to get people thinking about, how we live on this planet. And maybe we want to, get on our bicycle for any number of reasons, but also just that, our infrastructure is not solely designed, for the whims of people who want to drive. I drive a car. I drove my car down here. I'm not anti-car, but I am anti, not honoring the needs of pedestrians and public transportation and the electrification of the transportation system and the lovely benefits in communities of the lowly and long used bicycle. So we have been pretty excited about that possibility. I put this slide in because I just wanted to say that in the name of advocacy and using roadway, we have these trucks that we take beer from one place to another, and we use them as rolling PSAs around sharing the road. I'm obviously too enthusiastic about my clicker here. So at Tour de Fat, in its history, we've given out $5 million to causes that are all bicycle related. And so that's a really, for us to be able to support groups across the country who are working grassroots in their communities for bicycle safety and safe bikes for kids in schools and helmets and all of that is really gratifying for us. I'm going to go back. Let's see, what have I done here? So I've messed it up. But speaking of philanthropy, in addition, since about 93, we've given $1 per barrel away to philanthropy, and we focus that around climate stewardship, environmental stewardship, but especially as it relates to renewable energy and mitigating carbon impact and climate change, and local and sustainable food systems and kids in wilderness. And so, you know, it's another place where we feel like we have this opportunity to align with the communities where we do business and with the desires of our coworkers, and you know, with our own hearts as people who work in and run the company. So for me, I sold New Belgium along with my two sons to my coworkers in the very end of 2012. And in 2013, I started the New Belgium Family Foundation. So in addition to the work that we do, you know, the premise of that work is the power of regenerative capitalism. We were in the wildly lucky circumstance to be able to amass this wealth. And for me, the first question is, well, just like making ripples and splashes, how do you make sure that you don't squander that opportunity? And so we started in this process in a very naive way. We had no idea really what foundations did, really. We really had no idea. Kind of like we didn't know that we needed to talk about customers and coworkers. And that was actually fabulous for us because we did what we thought was the right thing to do, and we made up all these. We were shocked when we heard that, you know, foundations that did work in one area had their corpus invested in another area, because that just seems patently crazy, right? You're doing this work, say, you know, community safety, while you're investing in guns, or, you know, you can fill in any number of examples. We're working on climate stewardship and we're invested in big oil. So we approached it in the way that made sense for us. And so we do a combination of investing in and funding around three lenses, which are stewardship, inclusion, and community. And then our particular focuses are on livable, bikeable, walkable communities, renewable energy, and sustainable and local food systems. So that's kind of where I'm going next. I realized I am no longer the CEO of New Belgium, I'm thrilled to say. And it's been just wildly fun and exciting for a very long time. But I'm still the chair of the board, and it gives me the opportunity to see how we can kind of move capital from one place to another with my family, which is particularly gratifying. And so that's what's next in the world of New Belgium. And I want to close, which will give us a little time for questions. I want to close by saying we do this. It doesn't, on the face of it, make business sense, really, in a lot of things that we've done. And I just need to say that right up front. But it's going to one day. There are parts of it that absolutely make business sense. I think it's been very good for our brand. I think it's been very good for for the kinds of minds and hearts that we attract to New Belgium. And I think, when we get a few more things sort of straight in the world around carbon and, stranded assets and that kind of thing, that it will also make more financial sense than it currently does. But we do it for the long haul, and we do it because it matters to us, and it's all worked out pretty well. So, so we feel good about the work that we've done. That's really what I have to say. I'm excited to be here. Again, I want to thank all of you for your commitment. This has not been an easy year. In some ways, I think, though, that I'm guessing that it's probably galvanized you to work harder than ever because, there is no there back there that's, going to come and do this work. And so it falls on all of us in all sectors, big and small, to, put our shoulders to the wheel and our minds and our hearts to the issues at hand. So thank you very much for that, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any. And I think we have question people. Thank you. Apparently there's a microphone protocol, and I have been threatened about this. No, not really. If you want to shout it out, I'll repeat the question. We are going entrepreneurial here, folks.
I'm good? Oh, okay.
All right.
Hi, my name's Lindsay Gordon. I'm from Seattle, Washington, and having been connected to New Belgium somewhat before through both a grant that my organization received and the beer community in Elysian, I want to say thank you for everything you did at New Belgium. My question is, the beer industry is growing. There's a lot of small breweries. One of the questions that's come up in a lot of panels related to cities is scale and the ability of small cities, limited resources, and how bigger cities can help smaller cities to scale up on mitigation and adaptation. I'm curious from the brewery side as far as the sector, how do you see New Belgium having potential to help other breweries scale and be more responsible stewards in the carbon sphere?
Well, you scare me down to my toes with that question. Because I thought we were going really policy deep, and I'm a generalist. I have a lot of broad knowledge. Well, in part by doing things like publishing our life cycle assessment of a six-pack of Fat Tire. We have people who are very heavily involved there are sustainability committees as a part of our National Trade Association. And Katie Wallace and Dana have both been very involved in that work. They're both co-workers of mine at New Belgium. And, it's a collegial community. We pick up the phone when people call and give advice and try to be helpful. We recently purchased a small brewery in the Bay Area, which has been a really fun project as well. And we're, working bit by bit to sort of take some of our DNA there, but also learn things from them. So hopefully that helps. Okay, I was comprehensive. You guys are ready for the next thing. And I think that I am introducing, I'm sorry, I missed. They're blinding me here. Whoever you are, just shout out.
Hi, Kim. Just first off, thank you so much for everything that you've done, that New Belgium has done. And personally as well, you helped me get through grad school since I was interning at a brewery and used your carbon footprint to do a carbon footprint of Brewery Vivant in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Oh, fun. You guys do great work.
Yes. So thank you. I was wondering if you could touch on a little bit you mentioned employee ownership, and could you just touch a little bit on how that kind of influenced all the work that you just talked about? Because a lot of, I think, businesses, small or large, kind of dictate, from the top, this is how we're going to do things, this is what we believe in, but how did that kind of help drive the mission of New Belgium and everything you've done?
Well, I think employee ownership, and I only skimmed it because this is a climate conference after all, not an ESOP conference, but it certainly helps us to be focused and aligned. Our coworkers, I believe, generally speaking, are really behind our environmental stewardship core value. One of my favorite stories is about one of our coworkers who for years drove we had to send him home on his first day because he wasn't old enough. And then he came back when he was the right age, and we hired him, and he started out with a monster truck, and his vehicles got smaller over the years. And one day he said to me, "Working here has changed my life." And this was a kid who lived out in the country, had a fairly limited experience of a wider world and complicated, he was a kid still. And those are the things that you live for as a leader, when someone tells you that the work that you've been doing really has affected them as a human being. I mean, I'm just like, and I told him then, and I've told him since, that was energy for me for a very long time. I love that guy, Tim Carsrud, because, he looked at what we were doing and sort of made a conscious change to really take it in. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I got. Anyone else? Thank you so much.